Hi, I'm Richie Mackay.
And I'm Davey Bolt, and you are listening to the Wrong Bias podcast.
And welcome to show 54 of the Wrong Bias podcast. And it's a Bowls England special, as we are joined by the current CEO, Jon Cockcroft. During the show, we discussed the two hot topics of the day, the National Championships and International Bowls, and a little bit more. We have a quick review of the World Indoor Championships at Potters, and we welcome on board a new competition sponsor. Thanks as always to Lead to Succeed for their continued support. We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome everybody to another Wrong Bias podcast. It's been a while. Our last one was Boxing Day, so does it feel wrong to wish everybody a happy new year, mate?
No, definitely not. We've had a couple of comments, haven't we? People saying where I is. We're missing your sultry tones.
Yeah, where are we? In fact, actually, it'll be very remiss of us not to have a look back at the tremendous World Championships at Potters in January, mate. You went down, you played Julia from the USA, and I thought she acquitted herself very well in the singles against you, and you could see the improvement in the pairs as well. I thought she played really well in the pairs.
She did very well.
How many times has this you've been?
It's a third off the bounce, but I think about 6 in all.
Did you enjoy that long trip?
I love it.
Down the potholes on the road?
Yeah, the A47 was a lot better than it has been. I think me and Molly both commented there was not many potholes on the road, so I think they've been doing some repairs.
Yeah, I think it might have been the less weight that was in the car for Molly, because I wasn't there.
From your own point of view, disappointed again. There's only so many times you can see it, but a lot of people have said how well Les played, and I completely agree. Played really, really well, but I didn't put Les under enough pressure with my first ball. It was a bit slower than it has been in previous.
New underlay,
yeah. So it was running a bit slower, needing bigger swinging balls, which the majority of players played with. For whatever reason, I just continually dropped about 18 inches short of my first ball, and Les was in really good nick and obviously beat us too. And probably the worst I've felt from the last 3 years. You know, I had a great game against Stewie Anderson last year. I was going to be a battle. Michael Stepney beat us the year before after I'd gotten past Rob, so I was relatively happy. I walked off both times. I was just disappointed with this one. Les is an absolute class act, so always going to be a hard game, but I needed to do more than I did.
Congratulations to Stewie Anderson on winning the title. He was outstanding for the full 10 days and everything, really.
I've got to say, he was absolutely tremendous. I was watching the final. I mean, Tatty played tremendous as well, but just showed how well Stu played to beat Tatty, who was in really good nick himself as well. Probably one of the best performances I've seen down there.
And of course, Stuart and Darren Burnett taking the pairs as well. Mm-hmm. Congratulations to Julie Forrest and Nikki Brett, the mixed pairs. And the ladies, the Pocket Rocket, who was on our Boxing Day show, little Catherine Redknapp, taking the ladies singles. What was that, sixth title, something like that? Or
I think I said six because they should match Tatty's 6 world titles, the open singles. Nice to be associated on that basis. Come on, you win things.
It is, considering she won her first title when she was 12.
The only person who doesn't win out on the podcast, me.
Well, I won £10 on the post-code lottery, so yeah.
I rest my case.
Say no more. Congratulations to Darren Weir finally, after it's his third final, and he's finally getting over the line in the under-25s.
Yes, I mean, he's been trying since he was 29-year-old, and he's getting there in the end.
Yeah.
Well done, Darren.
Darren is, in fact, the Roger Miller of under-25 Bulls. Anybody who doesn't know who Roger Miller is, look him up on Wiki.
Cameroon. Is that the one you're talking about, Cameroon?
Cameroon, yes. Who apparently he's 48 when he played in the World Cup. Unofficially, he was 21 or something like that. Anyway,
I think that's his last year, so I don't think he can defend it next year.
no, hard lines to Rebecca Moby, who got to the final. Good to see a young female, a young gun getting to the final again. I hope she builds on that.
She beat the reigning two-time champion Daniel in the semi-final, didn't she? And I watched a bit of that game as well, and she played really, really well.
The world rankings has been updated since the World Indoor Championships, and the new number one is Stuart Anderson.
No surprise there, considering he's banged in the world and the Scottish this year.
Yeah, Paul Foster, number 2. Jamie Walker is at 3. Les Gillett at 4. Robert Paxton at 5. And Alex Marshall, after his great run at Potters, is back in the top 16 at 10. And the one to drop out was our mate Jamie Chesney.
Bit of a nightmare repeat for him. He played Jon in the first round last year, Jon in the first round this year, and on both occasions came off the wrong end. And I watched both games again. So that's Jamie potentially obviously going back into the qualifiers and trying to get back in there.
See if he can get back in. And of course, Harry Goodwin at 19 and Mr. Bolt at 21.
21, is it?
21, mate. Just your age.
Just me weight.
just your weight. That's me, that. The wildcards.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think if you drop out the top 16, you shouldn't get a wild card for at least 2 years after dropping out. No disrespect, Alex. Obviously, he's proved he's getting back in the top 16. But I think you drop out of the top 16 for a reason, and you shouldn't be given there shouldn't be the trampoline effect. You drop out, you come straight back up. Because I can see it coming further down the line where some of the more well-known, established top 16 players are on the verge of dropping out, and they'll end up getting a wild card. And I think it doesn't look good. Potentially,
mate, but ultimately it's what you can't argue against is it's down to the sponsors. Sponsors will pick who they want to pick, and they're the ones who put the money in. So you can't argue about the money that's going in there. Yes, you can advise. Yes, you can say whatever. But from their point of view, they want the best for their commercial, whatever they feel is best.
I quite agree, but I just don't think it's a good look.
Don't get us wrong. I know we've had this conversation before, and we had it, prior to the World Championships. And don't get us wrong. In an ideal world, if we were in a position where the sport was in a much better place and finances weren't a major issue, then you could dictate that. You could basically say that, and anybody from the outside sometimes just, whether they like it or whether they don't, the bigger picture is the fact that unless somebody's prepared to put their hands in the pot and spend 150 grand and pick who they want to pick, then unfortunately we can't argue against whatever they want. So whatever they want is what they get. And like I say, we can have the discussions with them, and we can recommend what we feel is best or what. But what we probably can't do is get to a point where they turn around and say, "Well, we'll just withdraw our money."
I'm taking my ball away, and I'm not playing.
Yeah, and that's the sort of the long and short of it, Rich. At the end of the day, it's like we've just got to accept the fact that we're not in a position. And I would love, hopefully, the way things are going, it is progressing. It's looking like potentially there'll be a third ranking event this year, which I think will be really, really good because it gives more opportunities. But yeah, it's for anybody who has that frustration, and I do understand why. But my opinion was the same probably 3-4 years ago. But when you start to understand what the contracts and commercial responsibilities, etc., are, then you start to understand why these things just sometimes happen.
A quick mention to Harry Goodwin. Made his debut on the carpet. Done tremendously well.
He did, and he was selected based on his world performances at his age group and achievements on a national level. So he was seen as an up and coming player. Sponsor's choice, want him in there, and he's come in, and for a boy who's come onto that carpet for the first time, phenomenal really, because I remember saying in the Christmas podcast, and I said it to him yesterday actually, I saw him and I just says, congratulations, because I says, to be honest, when I saw you got Wayne, who was really, really good on that carpet 90% of the time, I thought he would really find it tough. Genuinely thought for all Harry is, I thought Wayne would take him the cleaners just based on his knowledge of the rink. So full credit to Harry, just showed his class, and he's continuing to show his class. He's, you're seeing him on a regular basis against top players, and he's just doing it all of the time now. So there's definitely a massive future as far as he's concerned.
What'll be interesting is he's getting the 30 ranking points for getting as far as he did, and he's just on the outside the top 16 now. Whether he's got the urge now to go through the qualifiers to get into the top 16?
He has, yeah. He's already said he's going in the qualifiers.
Good.
He says the hardest part for him, he says he was really, really thankful for the fact that he got the opportunity. Feelings going into the championships where I've got this chance, try and grasp it with both hands and do as well as I can. And he says, now the hard bit is to back it up and go through the qualifiers and qualify myself, and obviously try and back that up for next year. So, yeah full credit to that. So on today's show, we'd like to welcome the Bowls England CEO, Jon Cockcroft. Jon, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you very much for coming along.
Thanks for inviting me.
No, it's great to have you on, Jon. And we've got the outdoor season fast approaching. It'd be good to hear the ins and outs of Bowls England. We've had Alistair on before. We'll hand you straight over to Mr. Mackay there. I've got a few questions that he was wanting to pose. So you crack on, Rich.
Again, Jon, delighted to have you on, mate. Absolutely delighted. That curly whirly that was sent down must have worked a treat, mate. There's a bit of a bribe.
I haven't seen a curly whirly for a long time, mate.
Curly whirly, Elizabeth Early. Yep, here we go. Right, here we go, mate. National Championships. From the first National Championships, combined one between the men and the women, from obviously they moved from Worthing to Leamington. Come a long way. I've never qualified at Leamington. I did qualify at Worthing, which I've always called the Mecca of Bowls, but me being an old fart and all that. It's come a long way. The stands, the streaming, the Brandon last year, the yellow Arriva Brandon. It looks like a big event now. Are you happy the way it's going off the green?
Absolutely. I think it's 10 years now that we've been at Leamington for the joint men and women's event. Yeah, I think it's heading in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. It's an interesting one for me because when I came into the sport, I sort of saw the opportunity for bowls from a participation growth perspective. But it was only probably really at the Commonwealth Games that I was sort of illuminated to the fact that actually it's a cracking spectator sport. And really what we're trying to do with the Nationals is we're trying to sort of slowly ease it towards a more spectator-orientated event without losing all the participation element of it. I mean, there were 2,700 qualifiers, so it's still a mass participation event, but the introduction of ticketing, the stands, live scoring, the streaming, we're sort of slowly trying to elevate it into something that feels like it's more akin to, the All England at badminton, or dare I say it, sort of one day maybe Wimbledon tennis or the like. And really the crux of the challenge is to get people that aren't necessarily connected with the players, either through family or friendships, to come down and recognise that watching the best players in the country is part of their sort of annual relationship with the sport. And we feel like we're slowly making headway there, and things like the streaming helps amplify and showcase what it's all about. And the sponsorship with Aviva certainly sort of lends itself to people who are less close to the Nationals, recognising it's a mainstream sports event. So yeah, we're pleased, but there's a long way to go. A long way to go.
Was it the Commonwealth Games set up that was that the thing that opened your eyes as to what the possibilities were in and around those greens with the big screens, etc., with the TVs, and the atmosphere looked fantastic down there. And I'm presuming, obviously, going forward, a replica of that. And it's not far away. I thought the setup and everything last year was the best I've seen it probably ever. By the way, I'm pro Leamington. The old man at the top there he'll always be Worthing. But no, I thought it looked great last year. And I think from what we saw from the Commonwealth Games, it just did look like a fantastic setting for a major championships.
Absolutely. I mean, it was partly the setup, but actually what it was the quality of the sport. And, the Commonwealth is relatively, depending on who you talk to, is sort of relatively traditional formats in the sense they're sort of long games, unlike some of the things that World Bowls are talking about now. But, and I was massively biased because of, having a vested interest in the England team to do well and emotionally sort of attached to all of it. But it was edge of your seat stuff. Every end felt like, the game could swing. Every bowl mattered, all the sort of cliches you hear in other sports. And I was just blown away by the quality of the best players playing against the best players. And objectively, you look at other sports that have got more of the showbiz and more of the numbers, and at the heart of it, I just felt like the quality of the sport was up there with anything I'd seen. And, you look at the amount of people who watch live darts and you just think, actually, there's something that could be pretty massive here if we got it right and packaged it right. And so the Nationals are part of that. But, one of the things in our strategy that we haven't even got close to, is what is the 2020 of bowls? What is our version of the BPL? And we haven't even started exploring that yet. I'm sure you guys might have ideas on that. But I sort of want to get our sport on mainstream TV. be. And streaming is one thing, and it's great, and it attracts and engages an existing audience, but you really need to be on TV to reach out to people that aren't close to your sport.
Yeah, definitely. I remember the one thing that stood out for me, and I hate singling the one game out because some absolute quality games, but it was when it panned back from the ladies pairs final back to the Olympic studio, and they were talking in the studio, and one of the co-commentators or presenters turned around and says, 2 seconds, I'm still sort of reeling from watching that match that we've just watched there. And that's the first time I've ever seen that sort of interest from outside of our sport, which I thought was a great thing.
And 10 million people watched it. I mean, I think the metrics sort of for 3 minutes, not vast amounts of time, but that's 10 million people seeing our sport in a way that they might not have expected it. Not only because of the quality of the sport, but the diversity of the player base. I mean, every shape and size and age. I mean, Chris Turnbull's 73, one of our visually impaired guys. We've got Craig Bowler, men, women, different ethnicities. It was a proper showcase of the inclusive, diverse nature that our sport in many ways is, but needs to be more so in the future.
Absolutely.
So that's off the green. Now, obviously, unless you're not connected with balls at this minute, there's a little bit background chatter about on the green, and it's the competitions, the proposed changes that has been put forward by the Working Party. Was the Working Party given a framework to work to introduce changes, or were they given a blank canvas and said, look, this is the national championships. Is there anything as ballers that you think we need to improve?
They were given a scope of work with a set of objectives. What we were trying to achieve, and still are trying to achieve from any competition changes, to elevate the blue ribbon events so that they're not diluted alongside a whole array of other competitions. We definitely feel that there can be more connection between our international and England side of things and domestic competition, and more sort of fluidity in terms of a player pathway. And we feel that our competitions can work harder to get new people playing. And so they were the sort of three key drivers around competition change. And that group worked on things. It sort of got battered around with the counties. We had sort of 2 or 3 sessions with the counties. Obviously the board spent time looking at it. And ultimately it was a set of recommendations that could have come from quite a significant amount of research over the last sort of few years. And as you can imagine, with such an array and diversity of people playing in these competitions, that their opinions are very, very varied. And so we're very mindful that any change isn't going to keep everybody happy. And so, we've plumped on a set of recommendations that we felt that were the right thing to deliver against those objectives. And ultimately, it'll be the AGM that decides on the route of the way that we're going to take these forward. So, yeah, interesting. I'm not quite so close to Facebook as I once was. I think since I was likened to Vladimir Putin a couple of years ago. And so, I do hear about some of the stuff that gets chucked around, and if it's constructive, that's all good. But
I mean, to be fair, I mean, I've looked at the proposals without going through 1 to 20. The return the champion of champions to the club champion, not a problem with me. Under 17 tournament, great idea. The only caveat to that would be nice to see the under 17 tournament at Leamington to give them the experience, and you'll get the wide-eyed reaction from it. The 2-ball singles, well, that's just my mind. Either love it or you hate it. There are 3 that really have got people's backs up at the minute. The top club, the double fours and the family pairs. The top club from your survey was the highest valued team event, came in about 52%.
Yeah.
And that format's been butchered. Don't know why. A Working Party would change a popular format. Your double fours, that was the second most valued team event, and that's been proposed to be an open event to introduce ladies. Now, I would have went down the route of introducing ladies double fours because there's plenty of ladies there. I love mixed balls, but everything doesn't have to be mixed balls. There's got to be a men's and a ladies pathway still. And the family pairs, which I think has got a lot of people irritated because to stop a sibling to play with an international, I think is wrong when you're trying to encourage people into the game. I mean, I couldn't play with my dad. If my dad could play now, obviously represent the county. I played for the Balkan. I don't know where they were coming from. I did look at the survey results, and I have to say, as a criticism to it, is why it was slightly agreed and slightly disagreed options. It should have just been a yes or no, and then you got it in black and white and you knew where you stand, because it appears all that's happened on the survey is, yes, you strongly agreed and you slightly agreed has been combined an agreed. Well, just go yes or no. I think you just put yourselves on the back foot with the way the survey went out. Would that be fair to say, John, or not?
No. The survey was carefully put together, and you've got to give a sense of the sort of extremity of views. So most of these sort of surveys have some form of sliding scale. Just to take those in turn. So the top club has declined in entry levels for quite some time now. I think we've got about 17 or 18% of men's clubs, and I think 12% of women's clubs competing in the top club. And there's a feeling that there's sort of increased domination by a handful of clubs. And really, at the heart of it, that recommendation is about trying to get more clubs engaged with our competition program and make it easier for clubs, maybe smaller clubs, to take part in it. I mean, there's stuff about the format. You use the term butchering. The view is that that's going to make for a more interesting evening of bowls, and more exciting towards the end of the second session. More chance of either team winning, which wasn't the case beforehand. In terms of the club the club fours, one of the drivers behind the recommendations is about gender parity and inclusivity, and it was felt that was a better way to go than introduce a new competition. We're already struggling a bit for female participation across our sport and in competitions, and it felt like it was a good step forward to having more open competitions, seeing men and women playing with each other more, which is increasingly the way I think it's going to go in terms of the way people are consuming sport these days. And actually, it's a really exciting thing for the more talented women to be able to pit their wits in that competition. And then the family pairs fully understand that causing a few challenges. Really where we're getting with this is that we want our top bowlers to be playing consistently higher quality competition that is more akin to world level formats. And actually, we've got a piece of work developing a performance strategy which hasn't been made public. That's going to our board in a couple of weeks' time as well. And there's a sort of regular thread around that about our top players playing too many competitions, not playing at consistently intense level, and that desire to see that top level really tested on an ongoing basis was shaping the changes that came with the Balkan and Walker, certain extent the Amy Rose and the White Rose, and the family pairs decision sort of fell into that. The other thing was that the research is telling us that the number one reason why people aren't playing in competitions is because they are concerned that they're not good enough, or they don't feel that they're good enough. And so we're trying to, through the recommendations, introduce or make sure there's some competitions that feel like they're more accessible and more inclusive to maybe bowlers that aren't quite as gifted, aren't the top bowlers. So the introduction of the novice pairs and the changes of the family pairs are intended to sort of make that gateway into our competitions program a bit wider.
I take that point on board, but I reckon the fella on the podcast with us was exactly the same situation as me, where when we started, we thought, well, I'm not going in there, but we did enter. We did enter, and we went on and we won bits and bobs here.
I think in response to that, Rich, on the argument side of things, I've said for a long time now that attitude towards competition has changed, and it's reduced and it's reduced and reduced over years. We see it locally. Players will not enter competitions locally, and this is why you open competitions. It's because you hear the comments. I'm not going in that because we're just hot hunting, and basically this new era of bowlers, I think there's a smaller percentage of bowlers who see that opportunity we used to say, I want to play the top bowler and I want to improve my game and do that. I mean, listen to obviously John's response to yourself. I mean, my first thought straight away was, let's not forget that this is a proposal. It's not an enforced change. The counties make the decisions. So basically, if players within counties have got an opinion of what they feel they want to see, then it's up to them to make their own county know, because that's where the vote's going to go. And one thing that sort of just intrigued me there as well, which I'm very sort of pro of as well, is making those individual, what we would class as the blue ribbon competitions, the singles, pairs, triples, fours, as the premier events, because I'm right in saying I think that Scotland only get one chance. I think they can only go into one of the competitions across the year. So as a country, we're really, really lucky to be able to play in as many as we want. But I think we'll very quickly forget that sometimes we whinge and moan at the fact that we're still going in 6 or 7 competitions and haven't got a life in the sport because you're playing 5, 6, 7 times a week. There's pros and cons. One thing we've always said, Richie, and we talked about this before. We've always said change is a dirty word within the sport. You've always said that as an ad, and it has been because people hate change. And yes, there's going to be disagreement. Yes, there's going to be people who want to stay the way they are. But I've also seen a lot of people who say they want to stay the way they are have quickly turned around and started to enjoy something that's new, and then the old thing is quickly forgotten about. So yeah, it's one of those things. You're hard and steadfast bowlers. I'm certainly not going to say I disagree with opinions, because that's what people have got. But at the same time, I would imagine, John and the committee and the guys, if something doesn't work, and it has changed, then I'm sure there's then going to be the opportunity to say, well, it hasn't worked. We revert back, or we try something again. So that would be my opinion on it. I'm certainly not adverse to changing the sport, and I'm certainly not adverse to the singles, pairs, triples and fours down at Leamington being the real pinnacle events to play for. So that would be my opinion, and I hope that sort of potentially is the pro side from my point of view of the things that's happening as well. We've seen all the time on Facebook and opinions, Richie. We've had comments about this podcast when we're doing streaming about people whinging because we get names wrong.
I think very dare.
I mean, they do. I mean, they use it as a platform. Yeah. Sorry, Bill. They use it as a platform to obviously air the views, but I also agree with the fact that there's a lot of it isn't always necessarily constructive as well. So it's taken the key points out, and as long as things are listened to and whatever decisions are made by the county, it's a democratic decision. So it is a proposal, like we said.
With the national governing body, I'm surrounded by a group of people at Bowls England who are passionate about our sport, and our board members have been living and breathing this sport for decades. Everybody wants it to thrive. We obviously just have slightly different views on how that might happen. And I think you do touch upon some interesting points there, David. I mean, the change. I remember vividly sitting in a room at Edgbaston when the ECB came to us talking about 2020 cricket, and everybody was up in arms. And I remember the first practice session that the players did, and they, to say that they didn't take it very seriously was like understatement. And now, 15 years later, all the same people that moan about 2020 cricket, who have enjoyed it for the last 15 years, and now moaning about the 100 coming in because that's going to destroy 2020 cricket. So we love sport because people are, hugely passionate about it and have a strongly held views, which is wonderful. But as an administrator, you've got to balance that desire to keep people engaged and keep people loving the sport who are already in it with the need to try and offer something slightly different to new people. And those two things generally can grate against each other. But I'm absolutely confident that if every one of these recommendations, these propositions was voted through, that we won't be seeing people leave our sport. There might be a few people playing a few fewer competitions, but we'll have an opportunity to get more people engaged with it, and ultimately that's what we're trying to do. And our competition players our national competitions players, I think, are about 20% of the bowlers that play in this country, and I'm as interested in the other 80% and trying to get more people playing our sport. And the fact that we're growing for the second consecutive year is testament to the fact that I think we're doing a few things right, which is good.
I was quite surprised as well at obviously the reduction in entries in the top club and things as well. And again, these are the things that as a player within the sport, you sometimes get a little bit blinkered to the fact you're in your team, you put your team in every year, but you don't sort of know about how many other entries are across the country. So that's an interesting thing, because as Richie said earlier on, the top club is seen as probably one of the premier team competitions. Everybody loves it, but there's got to be a reason why it's reducing, and why there's it's probably becoming more across the country select teams that basically are just dominating their areas. And like you said, it's becoming a case of usually it's similar teams competing in the national finals year after year. I love the top club format, so I wouldn't say I don't, but at the same time, I wouldn't also be against trying something different and seeing where it goes.
I just think that if you alienate the people who enter your competitions, there's only one outcome. You lose those people forever. They'll not enter the competitions again if you change something that people do enjoy.
Do you think they will?
I think they would. I think that I do. I think people would stop entering.
I'd say I'm I'm the opposite person, and I'm not.
I wouldn't go on something that I didn't enjoy.
I just think we've seen so many times. There's always the threat of I'm not going to play this and I'm not going to play that. But when the season kicks in and they're seeing all their mates playing in competition bowls, the sharp turn, they change their mind and just play it because they love competitive bowls. And I don't necessarily think you would say that personally.
Well, I think that the proof will be in the pudding when a couple of years' time if the proposals go through. I don't think they'll all go through, but that's down to the counties who hopefully are working to get feedback from the bowlers, but you never know. Anyway, sorry, John.
Sorry to interrupt, but let's not forget the bigger picture here, which is our sport has been in systemic decline, both from a general participation level over the last generation, but also these blue ribbon events, which need to be the pinnacle and need to be elevated. We've had about a 30% decline in entries to those over the last, I think the numbers that we ran started from 2014. So that's sort of eight or 9 years. So, you can sort of basically manage a decline or you can try and do something about it.
I quite agree. But is the decline not in correlation of introducing the senior events, the over 60 singles? I mean, somebody who goes in ordinary singles might fancy the over 60s rather than your ordinary singles. You can go down the route of people saying, well, I don't enter the competitions because I don't think I'm good enough. Now I don't enter the competitions because I feel as if I'm a bit old, but I'm up against people of the same age. So it can. What you don't want is to see your introduction to new bowlers go up in one end and losing it at the other end in your competitions. It's like, it'll remind us of, like, can you remember It's a Knockout? Where they used to be in the boat with the holes in, and they used to keep bailing the water out to keep the boats afloat. Well, if you're getting new members, if you're getting new people into the sport, and you're bailing your competitors out of your competitions, there's only one direction to go. The boat eventually sinks.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Nobody wants to go on a boat with holes in.
They
said the Titanic wouldn't sink, but hey, what happened? There was one little extra bit on the competition, John, and we'll move on. Clashes, the old favourite. Now, a lot of people have got short memories. Like Davey. Davey's got a short memory. He can't remember Worthing, unless you ask him when he won the singles.
I remember Worthing.
What year was that, son?
2011.
He says out with his press. Anyway, people at Worthing, they forgot there was clashes at Worthing. There's clashes at Leamington. Now, it was originally a 30-day national championships, I'm led to believe, at Leamington when you first had the combined. Is it now just a case of trying to show on too many events into 18 days? And is it time to go back to a men's and ladies championships? There you go, John.
No. It's definitely not time to go back to a men's and ladies championships.
Right.
The period of the nationals is reduced. We've articulated in some of the communications that we sent out why we feel that is the case, both in terms of the portion of time we spend around the national finals, how we, as I said earlier, trying to move the event to a more sort of spectator orientated commercial event, as well as delivering the volume of participation places. Entry qualification places, I should say. Don't want to see clashes. We certainly don't want to see clashes in the premium events like the blue ribbon events. And we feel that should the propositions get voted through, we can manage that. But yeah, it is to some extent symptomatic of the fact that we have a lot of competitions that are increasingly overlapping with people playing everything. And when you've got some sort of smaller counties and some of the better players, they're highly likely to end up qualifying in multiple things, which a lot of the recommendations are intended to avoid that.
Would it be on the agenda to possibly move some events away, because the mixed pairs and mixed fours used to be held at other venues, the latter stages?
Well, there's certainly a sort of recognition that for some of the competitions that people are entering them less because you have the chance to get to Leamington. So there's less of an onus on the sort of numbers of rounds being at Leamington for some of the competitions. But 2 years ago, we introduced more regional finals in an endeavour to try and address that. And actually, we felt that was a very positive thing because it was good for reduced travel time and people, supporting a local club in terms of having a really good sort of event. But that wasn't liked. They
didn't like it, did it? They didn't like it.
No. So
even though they voted for it, they didn't like it.
No, so you sort of can't win really.
People don't like playing the regional events away from Leamington, yet in 2 weeks' time they'll be more than happy to go and play the mixed fair pairs and fours down at Bristol instead of Nottingham for the national finals indoors. So it swings and roundabouts, and like I say, I must be getting old.
And we're really passionate about those key events getting much more coverage, much more airtime. For 2 years in a row now, we've sent press releases or a report on the men's and women's singles finals to the BBC, and pictures, literally spoon feed them that information to put online. They won't do it. And so that's the battle that we've got. Our national broadcaster is not willing to even tell the country who our best bowler in the country is.
Yeah.
And the best two bowlers in the country for that year. So it's all well and good saying it's all fine. Well, it sort of isn't. And we in a number of areas need to do some stuff about that. And so, we absolutely are focused on doing what we can to elevate those blue ribbon events to the level I think they perhaps once were.
We've already touched on it a little bit earlier on, but it's a dirty word. It always has been a dirty word. It's been a dirty word since we started this podcast, change. Do you think change is holding the sport back, John? The fear of change?
Fear of change is definitely,
Yeah, I mean, I think change is a sort of outcome, I guess. So I won't quite say that. I do think that, if you stand still, you effectively go backwards, and you look at some of the challenges we've got with the Commonwealth Games now, and the fact that they haven't arguably modernised that programme, and consequently it's in a difficult situation in terms of finding a host. So I would say investment is a big challenge for us as a sport in terms of creating change. We hugely under-index in terms of government support, which is sort of slowly starting to change. I think the sport struggles to command huge amounts of commercial revenue. We made some really positive progress because of more media attention, and consequently that's manifested itself in some wins around sponsorship, and we started to deliver income around ticket sales. I'm not sure that bowlers necessarily invest as much in the sport in relation to how much they expect out of it when you compare other sports. So I think we're sort of chronically under invested as a sport, and that manifests itself in a lot of challenges. So I think that's one of our barriers to change. I think we've got a very complicated governance structure with multiple different governing bodies and multiple different organisations running different bits of it, which it is a challenge in terms of sort of speed of being able to do things and the effectiveness of being able to manage change. There are some amazing people in our sport doing amazing things, and we've just been sort of through our process of shortlisting for the awards event that's coming up, and I know, David, you've been involved in some of the nominations. There's some absolutely brilliant people, but equally I think there's a few people that I wish would see opportunity before they see issues, and I think there's a bit of a culture at times of not sort of being open-minded to things that might look a bit different in the future. So I guess all that manifests itself in the fact that maybe, we haven't changed quite as quick as we should have done over the years. But I think that's ironically changing a bit.
Is it just the image? I mean, I've always said we'll never get rid of the image. I've been playing the game 40 odd years, and it's still got the old man's marbles image in some people's, because you'll see advert on the telly. And it'll be insurance company, and there'll be elderly people throwing the balls up, and that's just the image, unfortunately, that the sport's got. And I feel it's always going to have it with certain media outlets, and that's got to be a frustration for you, John.
Well, it's a bit of laziness, isn't it? You sort of go to the stereotype. I don't necessarily think it is about sort of that age and that old man's marbles. I think it's the way that we project the values and qualities of our sport. So actually, we're very, very proud that we're a sport that can be played throughout life, and give people in the latter part of their life exercise, connection with local communities, and I think we should be really proud of that. And I think there's a way of marketing that in a really, really positive way, sort of embracing a bit of the Captain Tom type sort of spirit.
Did you put a sauna down at Leamington? There'd be hell on. Make sure you've got planning permission.
Well, I think the commentary room's a bit like a sauna bowl. When I arrived at Bowls England, we had no marketing budget. And I think one person had 20% of their role sort of doing marketing. We've now got a marketing team of three, and we're starting to change that. I think the first year after, right in the midst of the first COVID, I was trying to do a bit of a marketing campaign to get people back on the greens during that summer in 2020. I could not find one picture, anybody enjoying themselves playing bowls. There was lots of white dots at the national finals, but I couldn't actually see somebody with any form of emotion. And we had to create this sort of cartoon, somebody had to draw somebody enjoying themselves. We've invested over the last 2 or 3 years in photography, in the look and feel of some of our publications, in PR. And it's not easy because there's so much clutter out there, and you've got to pay so much money to get any standout in the way people consume things these days. But we do feel we're projecting a more modern image, and we do feel we're projecting an image that's actually more reflective of who we are. I mean, you have to leaf through, our website or our annual report or various other things, and there's lots of different pictures of people from different backgrounds and different ages that are playing our sport. And so I think that, the first point there was just trying to just, present what we're all about, without it just sort of defaulting to the stereotype. Because the stereotype is, we did ask a load of people that weren't into bowls 3 words to describe bowls, and unprompted, they did say old, slow and boring, which wasn't particularly good start. So we do have a challenge there, but ultimately we are seeing people start playing our sport who haven't done previously, and so to some extent it's working.
And I agree with that. I've said in previous podcasts, again, I've said since COVID, for me, I do feel that we've gone through that. We lost a generation of people who were chased away from greens and saw the stereotype uniform of greys and whites and the caps and the blazers, and they are now the parents of today, and have probably discouraged the youngsters to go along and try the sport. But I think since COVID, I've certainly in a lot of clubs seen a lot more family orientation with regards to people coming along and giving the sport a go, especially because, as we talked about, people were locked indoors for a long time. We were lucky enough as a sport to be allowed to be back on the greens earlier and play our sport earlier than anybody else. You've introduced Bowls Bash now, John, as a governing body, which is a very, very simple, but puts the sport in a completely different light. It's different, it's exciting. But what I keep telling people, and what it's no different, the format actually, to a league or a competition in Sunderland that we've played for 30 years. It's a 3-2-1 competition where there's more points on offer, a little bit more excitement, and the teams in Sunderland love the competition because it doesn't always necessarily favour the better teams, and you've got more opportunities to actually, cause an upset, etc., etc. And I think for me, the biggest thing from Bowls Bash is the imagery and the videos that we promote through the Play Bowls platform puts the sport in a completely different light. It is people actually on the green, having a smile, in relaxed clothing, and just playing bowls, and that's what it's about. And I think it does, hopefully, I feel it is very slowly, and I agree with Richie to an extent. There will always be a portion of people out there who will associate the game as those 3 words that you've just said. But I do also feel there's a new era coming in where people are actually just going to accept the fact that it's a sport like any other, and they can come along. And hopefully that's the sort of group of people we've got to introduce and try and let them know that it is a fantastic sport, and don't let the barriers of what you think stop you from actually coming on and having a go.
It's an opportunity now for, new people to come in, but also people who are playing the sport already to say to their mates who've always sort of turned their nose up about the idea of playing bowls, look, how about, you come along, we'll have a few beers and you try this. And it just opens up our sport in a way that, without it, we wouldn't necessarily have that opportunity. The branding, we talk about marketing and branding, that's one element of our challenge. But I think at the heart of our challenge is that bowls is such a doable sport. It's relatively affordable. Physically, anyone can do it. There are bowls clubs everywhere up and down the country. If you include all codes, I think we've got the 3rd biggest number of clubs after cricket and football. But we've made a sport that actually is totally accessible and fantastic when you actually get going and get addicted to it. Inaccessible for loads of reasons. Games are too long. Big fences with members only signs, clubs without a mixed offer that's sort of, full membership or nothing. Dress code sort of like, do I really sort of, do I have any of those clothes in my wardrobe? Could I? And we are slowly but surely, I think together, breaking down those barriers. And I think, it's just, as it took a generation, as you say, to be lost, it's going to take a generation to really, break all those barriers down and get us back to where we want. But it definitely feels like it's happening in our view.
Yeah, and a lot of the people who I've met doing the training as well are what I would class as, a younger generation as far as our sport's concerned. And when I'm saying that, we're potentially still talking about the 50s up to the 60s mark, but that's a big difference to the 70s to the 90s who sat on committees and just sit there because they want a little bit of importance within the club. What I've seen, without a shadow of a doubt, is new people coming into the sport and wanting to make a difference. They want to change things, they want to move things forward, and ultimately they just wanted to be more relaxed and for people to just come on and play balls, not to worry about all of the rubbish that goes along with all of these stupid rules and procedures that clubs gone by have tended to put in place. And that's exactly why we lost a generation. And that's why I say all of these parents of the day were the ones who saw all of these uniforms and have just thought, we don't want to go down there, because they remember what it used to be like rather than what it is now. And I think, you'll know as well as anybody, John, it's not going to happen overnight. It's small steps. It's bit by bit. But from what I've seen and from the people who I've talked to, I've definitely seen a massive difference in opinions and people now just starting to talk and using their feet to actually, in the nicest possible way, oust these committee members who have continually put barriers and always said, that's the way we've always done it. And Richie will have heard it years and years and years. That's the way we've always done it. We've done this and we've done that, and we're not going to do this. That's where I come back to the fact of people don't necessarily like change, but they quickly forget about that change if it's something that's good for them. Bit of sad news and a bit of great news for us as a podcast. Obviously, just want to pass on our thanks to Top Ring Bowls, who had a short period of time with us supporting the podcast. Fortunately, hard and tough business that it is in bowls retail down recently. But what has happened, after a couple of discussions, a bit of a poignant one for me, this one actually, we've now got Bowlswear Direct as our new competition sponsors for the podcast, which is great to have on board. And the reason I'm saying it's a bit of a strange one for me, it's a bit of a full circle. Chris and Pete both run Bowlswear Direct. Back in the day, probably, late 90s, when Big Norman Routledge, most of you hard and fast bowlers who used to go down to Worthing and to Leamington as well, and remember Big Norman, big ginger, you couldn't miss him, absolute top bloke. And I used to do some work with him and do some road shows. And Chris was doing exactly the same thing at the time. And then when Chris and Pete decided to buy into the business, and been doing that now since 2016, I believe. Great to be involved with them again. They were actually one of my first ever sponsors. Norman used to give us a nice tartan bowls bag and a nice pair of moccasins for free and a t-shirt back in the glory days of the really high-tech equipment. Great to have them on board. Thanks so much, guys. I think on that note, we'll have a little question for a £40 voucher to be spent at Bowlswear Direct. This will be the first competition for them. And what I'm going to say is, if you check on their website and go to About Us, one of the highlights of Chris's explaining a 3-man test series in Australia with a former world champion. Give us that former world champion. So all we need you to do is one person go on there, stick the answer onto the Facebook page, and we'll get 250 people following it. So if anybody's got any sense and they want to win the competition, stick the wrong name in first, and then 2 minutes before the close of time, stick the right answer in and you might win it. That's our competition for today. Thanks again to Bowlswear Direct. We're looking forward to working with you in the future, and we'll have a few more competitions running throughout the year.
The future of the Commonwealth Games looking very bleak, to say the least. What do you think the future of international bowls in the UK is? Now, I'm going to nail my colours to the mast, do you mind you? And for me, when I started bowling, I wanted to play for the club team. I then wanted to play for the county team, and I then wanted to play as an international. You're going to love this, because I've always said the crown jewels of outdoor bowls is a 6-ring home international series. And Davey's laughing at us. I think the decision to get rid of that was horrendous, mind you. I know the new format, the new speedy up format, the new different, not a problem with that. I always thought that you could have ran it alongside, but not to throw, for me, what is the ashes of bowls. Obviously, there was reasons. If it was financial, then, yep, fair enough. I'll hold my hands up and say, right, okay, you haven't got the money, can I run both? But what's the future of international UK bowls?
Well, there's quite a bit there in that question. So Commonwealth Games. So at the moment we're in a bit of limbo. The Commonwealth Games Federation have obviously got a settlement from Victoria, and they're trying to explore, who might host it in 2026. We've got a bit of a deadline of March, April for them to make a decision. But I think it's increasingly unlikely that a host city is going to come with 2 years to go to host an event of that scale, particularly with the sort of political and economic climate around the world. So I think that'll be a challenge. And I think fundamentally we've all got to look at the Commonwealth Games and that event and try and work together to reinvent it. And our challenge, in terms of bowls administrators, which is largely led by Neil and Neil Dalrymple and the guys at World Bowls, is to make sure that the bowls has got a place in that future event. We're now, alongside netball, the only sport that is a Commonwealth Games and not an Olympic sport, and we need it. We need our moment in the sun. I talked a bit about the viewing figures earlier, and the Commonwealth Games is the only event really where we do become very visible and relevant to lots of people. So I'm confident that we'll get into a good place with it, but certainly it is a bit of a hiatus. In terms of the international side of things, the core driver for change around the home nations internationals is Scotland and England predominantly have driven by desire to see more consistency in terms of the formats played by our best bowlers. If we are going to have a successful international program, ultimately it needs more investment. We can't afford to continue to put everyday members' money into international bowls when we're trying to drive participation. And the only way that we're going to get more investment is if Sport England put more money in. And if Sport England put more money in, it'll be based on the fact that we're successful at the Commonwealth Games. So we have to put ourselves in the best possible place to be successful with the Commonwealth Games. And so we want our players to be playing more of the disciplines that are in the Commonwealth Games. So the fact that everyone would be playing a 6-ring fours just didn't work from a performance perspective. We've never actually been happy with the changes. I won't bore you with the politics behind it, but we weren't happy with the format that was played last year, where England women ended up playing women in a final, which didn't really work, frankly, and we did preempt that. But I can't really sort of disclose the details at the moment, but there will be an announcement about a tweak to the format, which we're comfortable with. Ireland, who have got now a significant amount of support from the government in Ireland to boost their performance programme, are on board with that, and Wales came on board a couple of weeks ago. So we're in a position that we can roll out this new format. And we're going to be hosting it at the end of June, so we'll put a bit of energy behind trying to, elevate it, a bit like we're talking about the Blue Ribbon event, so more people see it and more people get behind it, because there's not as many people watching international bowls as there should be in our view. So we're positive about that. More broadly, I think I touched upon just before, we've just developed a performance strategy, and the intention of that is we've never had one really for the whole of our sport. We've had a strategy towards the Commonwealth Games, but is to create much more clarity for the top players in terms of what our performance pathway looks like, really ramp up coaching. There's not enough high quality coaching in our sport. There's not enough time that our best players are actually practicing as opposed to playing competitions, and there's loads of other stuff in that performance strategy. And ultimately we want to go to Sport England and say, look, this is what we're trying to achieve around our performance program. Can you support the delivery of that? So I'm pretty optimistic about all that, but yeah, the Commonwealth Games sort of is a slight sort of black cloud at the moment that hopefully will clear with a fair wind.
Would it not have been possible to run a home international series as a separate event? Because ultimately you're only going to get 6, 8 elite players that's going to play for your Commonwealth Games, whereas your home international series, there'll be Joe Bloggs playing at his club who's went through the county and he's getting a possibility of getting a lead at an England international. If you make the availability smaller, then surely you're cutting off the likes of Joe Bloggs to get that far, because if you go through your records, you'll see that there are occasions where somebody's played in one international home international series and they wouldn't have the opportunity. Surely you're reducing the opportunities for Joe Bloggs, the average club bowler, to progress to that level. You're concentrating more on your elite bowler. And I do agree with you. The only way you'll get funding, you'll not get funding with Joe Bloggs wins a club pairs for 50 quid and knockout pairs. You get your funding through your medalists. And I fully appreciate it. But I just think taking away that 6-ring home international series, it might be me being old, stuck in the mud. I think the NGB's read the room wrong.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're entitled to your view. We don't agree. I mean, there's a lot of talk about sort of the chances of playing for England, but broadly speaking, compared with most sports, the chances are relatively high when you look at sort of participation numbers, and so I don't really buy that. To be honest, we've got to make sure that there is a pathway for people who are entering our sport to ultimately, play for England, and that is there. The under-18s tournament's going well, under 25s too. So that pathway is there, and we do have an incredibly limited budget for this. So the idea of playing a new format as well as the old one, I don't think was particularly palatable. And actually, if there is sort of spare money floating around, which there isn't, there are questions mark. Well, why don't we play more Test matches? Why don't we invest in some of our top players going out and playing more in Australia and experience Australian conditions, given the amount of major internationals are in Australia? And actually, world bowls are looking at a whole array of different formats and different competitions at the moment that are likely going to make some major changes at world level, and we need to be playing at a British or a European level much more consistent with those world bowls formats if we're going to be successful.
It's a really positive thing as well to hear that obviously that those changes are going to be made, because I agree with exactly what you said. I thought the spectacle of an England v England is a great thing for England, but it wasn't when it's based up in Scotland and you want to increase more people coming down to those international series and watching, and that was probably never going to happen up in Scotland. But obviously, you've been in the role for a long time. Within your role now, John, where do you see the next couple of years as far as the sport outside of competitions concerned? Where do you see that going?
So we're think about 3 years into the Fit for the Future strategy, which was written in 2021. So we've got a lot of work to do around sort of some of the elements that we haven't started in that, such as what is the 2020 of bowls. We haven't even touched sort of junior youth participation and how we really sort of stimulate more youngsters that might not necessarily be that bothered about some of the more high profile sports. So they're two big areas. But largely, I think we need to just continue, the direction of travel that we're on at the moment. Hugely passionate about Bowls Big Weekend, Bowls Bash, and the Play Bowls platform. We absolutely need to, if we're going to grow as a sport, drive much more of that casual participation that you talked about earlier, David, and then eventually these people will migrate into potentially playing competitions or volunteering and supporting the running of clubs. So that to me is still the major driver, and then ultimately we've got to try and get more investment in our sport, whether it be sort of driving that commercial income by turning our sport more into a spectator sport, or managing to work across codes to drive more income in through Sport England funding, and then we can continue to really invest in the sport. And we've never been more invested in our sport. I think when I started, we were turning over about 800,000 or 900,000 and drawing on building up our reserves. So we weren't really investing in our sport. Now we're sort of about 50% bigger as an organisation in terms of turnover and spend into the sport, and we've drawn down on quite a lot of reserves. So we now really need to turn the sort of platforms of growth that we've got in the sense of some of these new participation products and new sort of spectator offering into something that's really scalable, and that's sort of quite a big challenge. But yeah, I'm passionate about Bowls' capability of just being a force for good, making people's lives better, connecting communities together, which is sort of the heart of our mission. And it feels like there's still a lot of work to do, and that we feel like we've sort of turned a bit of a corner. But there's still plenty to do. So I'm as motivated and ambitious as I was 3.5, 4 years ago when I started.
Have you got grey hairs yet?
Oh yeah, definitely.
You still got hair?
Just about.
That's a starter. Just one last one from me, John, and it's probably just a follow up to what you've mentioned, financials. Now, I got the annual report. I managed to get it with the information from the counties, and the one red flag that threw in front of us straight away was making the loss of the 230,000. Now, financially, is that going to affect your future bid for the World Championships is it 2027?
No. So our long-term strategy, when we developed Fit for the Future, was that we would draw down on our reserves the first few years of that strategy. Ultimately, what has happened historically is we haven't spent that money, and consequently, we haven't seen the investment in the sport, whether it be about marketing, product development, and the organisation was sort of managing a steady decline. So the strategy was accompanied by a long-term forecast, was that we would draw down those reserves over 3 or 4 years. We've now got to a stage where we can't do that anymore. We've got about £600,000 or £700,000 worth of cash reserves. We still own a property in Worthing. And we've got about £500,000 out on club loans because we support our clubs when they need to get a new mower and the like. So it's not like we're in any financial difficulty, but we do need to operate the business now in terms of a break-even level. And so the approval at the AGM last year of increasing the affiliation fees by £2 is sort of going to help balance those books next year. But ultimately, we need to continue to get more people playing and more people watching our sport and more people investing in it in order for us to maintain the amount we spend on different areas. If we don't, then we'll have to cut our expenditure, which will ultimately be counterintuitive to all the things that we want to do to try and keep growing. So yeah, it's nothing to be concerned about. We're broadly sort of financially on track, but yeah, it's sobering to think that we need to really now turn a lot of the investment into.
I mean, like you say, your biggest income is your affiliation fees, and we ain't got a problem with the increase in affiliation fees, because if you've ever listened to this podcast from day one, we've championed the affiliation fees for national governing bodies, because every sport you have an affiliation fee which keeps that sport going. And I think a lot of people within the bowls, and I've said it, and Dave, you'll probably shake his head here, I've always said bowls, especially up in the northeast, has been too cheap for too long. It's a great sport. If you can get Davy's favourite word in, the hook, they get the hook, you've got them for life. I also think, mind you, regarding your affiliation fees, there's just a little bit of, how can I put it, lack of information between the clubs and the national governing bodies as to what a club gets out of the affiliation fees. Because I can guarantee, John, if you ask a member of any club, what do the Romans ever do for us? What's the affiliation fee from Bowls England? You'd get somebody saying, yeah, they run the competitions and that was it. And they don't actually see the good that I see. I go on the website and I see all the good that Bowls England do for the sport. And the affiliation fee is the thing. And anybody who complains about it, just come on the podcast and we'll discuss it.
Well, it's good to hear that. And a lot of people aren't bothered about their governing body, frankly. They're happy playing their bowls, the local club, and that's fine. I mean, I think there's a huge misconception about the affiliation fee, because it's the way it works is an amount per bowler, that it provides individual benefits, where it doesn't actually. It supports that club so that it can deliver, club management and a whole array of different things. So I think there's a sort of always been a bit of a misunderstanding about it. But I would urge people to, it sounds like you've done, Richie, have a little look at our annual report, look at our website. There's lots of information there about the good things that we do to support our clubs. I mean, the BDA guys ran a fantastic week of learning a couple of weeks ago, and I think we had a couple of hundred Bowls England clubs on that. learning about safeguarding and bowls bash and a whole array of things. My view, and you can see that with the awards, when you have club leader, a set of people that are wanting to really drive a club forward and are really, really, positive, open-minded, working with us at a national level, people can make a difference and they can grow their club and sort of set it off on a real sort of positive path. But it requires effort and it requires hard work and generally, often thanklessly, because there's a lot of people in all sports that play their sport, take all the fun out of it and don't necessarily do much, and that's their choice and that's their gift. But all those people that are the ones that are driving clubs forward, we're as a governing body don't always do things perfectly, but we are here for them, and we are introducing many more things that can make their lives easier. So we will continue to try and do that.
Great stuff, John. Thanks so much. Obviously, sorry we've gone a little bit over.
Not at all.
Said, but it's been a great discussion. There's people out there who, again, I think it's really important because they'll have their own opinions about things. They're a little bit blinkered sometimes, and when you actually hear the reasoning as to why some of these things happen, hopefully those within the sport who understand that change is a very positive thing and not always a negative thing that some people think it is. But it's been great having a good chat, John. But it's been a pleasure. Richie, anything else you want?
No, thanks very much for coming on, John. You can go and watch Vera now, mate.
It's great to chat and keep doing what you're doing, because it's great to have more bowls content out there, and good on you for trying to make a difference.
Yeah, thanks, John. Really appreciate it.
Great for coming on, mate. Much appreciated, mate. Thank you very much.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Bye, mate. Right, there you go, mate. And what a cracker we've had tonight for show number 54. Many thanks to Jon Cockcroft, the CEO of Bowls England, coming on. It was very good of him to come up in front. We tried to put the questions that we think people wanted to ask, and he was kind enough to answer. Whether my old saying is, if you don't like the answer, don't ask the question. I thought it was very good, mate.
I'll give him a lot of credit for coming on. It's quite easy to shy away and not answer the question. And like I say, I think there was points that you raised, and listening to John, and obviously working inside of the sport now and seeing the things that happen and the things that you've got to do. It's all very well to say and jump on and criticise and have a go. When you see the day-to-day runnings of clubs and you see the day-to-day barriers and things that are in place, and the age-old thing of what we talked about there, clubs will not budge at times and not move. But what we are seeing is the ones that are prepared to move and the ones who are making these changes are reaping the benefits, because if you give people an option of Club A and Club B, and Club B is the one who's sticking by the guns and they want the greys and the whites and they want the blazers, I've got no issue with that. That's what their club want to do. I've got no issue. That's the way it is. You give a 2024 member of the public the option now between that and coming to a club that's proactive, forward-thinking, does different things, has a much better offering as a club. We know which ones they're going to choose. And like I say, I'd be a liar if I said that I agreed with. I'm going to emphasise the word proposals, because that's all they are. They're not enforcements, they're proposals. So one thing I really want to just stress as a closing, again, is that the governing body there is to try and improve the sport. They've put a framework in place. They've asked a group of people to come up with some ideas with a bit of a framework. But ultimately, what everybody out there needs to remember, rather than penning it on Facebook or penning their opinions wherever they want to pen it, all they've got to do is speak to their own county administrators. Those people who run the counties are ultimately the people who are going to make the decisions, because it's not made by Bowls England. Bowls England is made up of all of the counties across the country. So if there's that much negativity and there's not that much angst or people who want to do it, then what they need to understand is that it's their county who's going to make this decision ultimately. Are they going to go to their own county, and are they going to criticise their own county if they make the decision that they don't agree with? They're going to voice their opinions against the governing body, who ultimately are only doing democratically what the counties want, because that's what this country is made up of.
The thing that's still got in the back of my mind is, yes, the county proposals are there, come from the working party, but Bowls England have ratified them, as in they've agreed that they should go forward. Now, that for me shows that Bowls England are on board with them proposals. That would be my only red flag, mate. Otherwise, like you say, it's down to the counties who ultimately decide it. Will the counties get the feedback? I mean, I put a survey out just to get response to the working party question, so it gave Bowls Durham a little bit of guidance as to the feeling. And to be honest, anybody that doesn't fill it in, well, they've got no comebacks to me.
Yeah.
But there you go, mate. A very lively one there. Right, folks, we hope you enjoy this one. Feel free to leave comments. We'll love to hear your feedback from it. And we'll catch you soon. We'll be out streaming soon. The PBA qualifiers, we've got a few booked in for April already. And as always, thanks for your support. And we will catch you later.
See you later, all.
And finally, as we said goodbye to the last surviving member of the Warmington-on-Sea Home Guard, here's something to bring a smile to your face.
Lunatic who looks like Charlie Chaplin. How dare you compare our glorious leader with that non-Aryan clown? Oh, look here. I am making notes, Captain. And your name will go on the list. And when we win the war, you will be brought to account.
You write what you like. You're not going to win this war.
Oh, yes, we are.
Oh, no, you're not.
Oh, yes, we are.
Whistle while you work. Hitler is at work. He's half army, so's his army. Whistle while you...
Your name will also go on the list. What is it?
Don't tell him, Pike.
Pike.
Thank you for listening and hope you've enjoyed the show.
This has been a Dodgy production.